Hey YouTube, Alex Conley here, and in today's video I want to talk a bit about why expat lifestyle is not for everyone. And I'm bringing this up because a lot of people have this idea that living in another country can be really exciting, really fun, fulfilling, interesting, and a great learning experience. And all these things can be true. I've found my long-term travels abroad to be incredible and kind of hard to put into words at times. But that being said, I've done a lot of research into living abroad, and I'm certainly a possibility in my future. I'd like to make sure that, most importantly, the financials line up. But I'm going to go ahead and get into this video. The topic today is why the expat lifestyle is not for everyone. Why, even though it can be a great experience, why it's not for everybody. So first off, it's not free. Some people get the perception that if they live in a Western country, a relatively expensive country, USA, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, UK, that simply moving to a cheaper country, say Mexico, Cambodia, Thailand, these countries will be significantly cheaper and it'll just be all around better. And so yes, these countries are cheaper in many ways, but it's not free to live in these places. You're still going to have to account for rent. You're going to have to account for food, transportation, internet, toiletries, medical, dental, and a lot of other things. If you like Western luxuries, you're going to pay a premium in these countries for Western luxuries. Sometimes, in some cases, more than you'd pay in the West. I remember I was in the Philippines a couple of months ago, and I was at a steak restaurant. I think it was just a general restaurant, but they had steak on the menu, and I looked at the steak prices, and the cheapest steak was like $20. So in the United States, at many of the restaurants in the area where I'm from, you can get a steak meal for $20. That includes sides and other luxuries. In some cases, like $15, $12 to $15. So that was the first time where I was like, okay, wow. So not everything is cheaper over here, and certainly nothing is free. So keep in mind that when you're looking at the expat lifestyle, you're going to have to account for how are you going to make money, whether it be a pension, a business, investments. You're going to have to come up with a way to cover your monthly expenses and account additional money for potential emergencies and unexpected costs. So don't get the idea that cheap is the same as free. And something that I kind of read recently on Reddit, some people get it in their mind, oh, well, all these things are cheap, so I can splurge more. Well, if you buy a ton of little low-cost things, this can add up. I mean, if let's say that the average amount I spend on a meal in Thailand is $6 to $8, and in my home country, I'm only used to eating out infrequently because it'll cost $15. Well, if I eat out every meal of every day, now you're looking at $20-25 US a day. And you can eat on a lot less than that in the United States. Now, can you eat out on that much? Probably not that much, but still, it's worth considering that if you go into this with the mindset, well, everything's cheap, I can enjoy all these luxuries. Well, all these small luxuries add up. And if you're looking to take vacations in these countries, that's not going to be free either. Not everybody wants to spend their entire time at their apartments and just kind of hanging out. A lot of people, when they come to Southeast Asia, for example, they want to go to the beach, they want to go to the mountains, and to enjoy these things is going to cost extra on top of your normal day-to-day routine. So while it is relatively affordable compared to the West in many ways, costs can certainly add up. So keep in mind that if you're looking at this type of lifestyle, leaving your home country for another, it's not going to be free. Kind of one last point on that, if you want to visit your home country, that's probably not going to be cheap. It's probably going to cost hundreds of dollars to visit your home country. So when you do think about leaving, keep in mind how often are you going to want to go back, because that's going to certainly add on to your costs. Next point, it's not necessarily easy. I think some people get it in their minds that, well, I'll just move to this other country and life will be on easy mode. I won't have to commute. I won't have to deal with family I don't get along with on holidays. Everything will be affordable, everybody will be friendly. Well, these are some of the upsides, but it's not always easy. Just as an example, and we'll go back to the Philippines for this one, a number of the Philippines, well, most of the Philippines, if not all of them, are just islands. So when you think about getting goods and services on an island, it can be challenging, particularly with the goods, because you're talking about importing things. Things have to travel to your location by boat or by airplane. So if you go to the store and they're out of something, keep in mind it might not be getting there for several days. If you're on a more remote island, it might take a week or two for you to get certain things. And so, it's not necessarily going to be like a Western country where you can assume that most stores will be stocking basically their whole inventory, and if they're out of stock on something, you can just drive to the next city over and they'll automatically have it. Keep in mind that in many of these more affordable countries, infrastructure is still developing and growing and improving, and you might not be able to have the level of convenience that you're used to in a Western country. Aside from that, another one as far as ease goes, Philippines English is prevalent, but if you're like in Thailand, like I am right now visiting Thailand, English is not as prevalent. Even in Bangkok where I'm at now, there've been a couple of instances where I've had to pull out the translator app to communicate. I went to pick up some laundry detergent yesterday here in Bangkok, and I went up to the store clerk and I said, "Laundry, do you have laundry detergent?" And he kind of looked at me, the look where somebody gives you and they don't speak your language, and I was embarrassed. I was like, "Oh man, like people tell me English is super prevalent in Bangkok. I just assume, because I talk back home with folks sometimes. Oh, I just assume he knows English." Well, he didn't speak English and he didn't understand what I was saying, and so it was on me to pull out the translator app and to type in laundry detergent to show him, hey, and then he immediately understood because it showed up in Thai, and he was able to help me find it. But keep in mind that if you're not speaking the local language, that's going to add a layer of difficulty. Now, you can combat this by taking language classes, but it might take several years before you become comfortable in conversation. So keep in mind that that's another layer of difficulty, where if you're used to being able to talk to people in English all the time, every day, 7 days a week, regardless of where you go in your country, well, if you move to another country, that might not be the case. What else could kind of hurt the ease? Well, another one that some might not think of, in the United States, everybody has a car. Cars are really common. It's considered normal to just get in your car and drive. But here in Thailand, the driving is totally different. They drive on the different other side of the road. Motorbikes are common, tuk-tuks are common. You're going to see more things that you're not used to in the road, and so driving can be challenging. If you're used to just, I need to go to the store, I'm just going to hop in my car and drive down there, well, that might be a lot more challenging here. So that's another way in which, if you're used to the freedom of mobility that you get in your Western country, particularly if you're outside of a major city where there's not public transit, well, keep in mind that here you may have to learn a whole different way of just transportation. So kind of my next point, I feel like when a person becomes an expat, they're trading one set of problems for another. If in their home country they felt like it was expensive and the meat grinder, as far as just having to work constantly to get by, keep in mind that in their new country, they will have the challenges with maybe not understanding the local language, maybe not being able to get the items that they're used to getting, perhaps having to be more patient, understanding that sometimes things in other countries do not move as quickly as they're used to. People are perhaps at times not in as much of a hurry as what they're used to, as what they expect. So it's not going to be eliminating your problems. Kind of alongside that, some people feel like if they move to another country, it'll solve their mental health challenges, but that's not the case either. If you have mental health challenges in your home country, understand that you're going to be carrying those with you to your new country, and simply moving countries is not going to solve all your problems. You're trading one set of problems for another set of problems. It's really a trade-off. A friend of mine that works in IT here in Asia, he was explaining to me, it's a comfortable life in a Western country. It's a predictable life. It can be boring, but you're gonna, make the assumption that if you work hard that you'll get ahead. But in some cases, in other countries, it may not be a direct path upward. Just simply because of too many variables that you may not be able to account for from not having grown up in this other country. So that's worth considering, that you are trading one set of problems for another by moving to another country. It depends, if you prefer having this other set of problems, it's going to work out for you. If you have patience for the fact that you're not living in your home country, that things aren't the way that you're used to doing things, you'll be able to adjust. But some people never adjust. Some people live in Asia, Mexico, take your pick, for decades, and they don't learn the new language. And I think that really can hamper their enjoyment of the experience. So that's a big thing I recommend, is just understanding that you're gonna have to adjust to a different set of problems if you do become an expat. Next, kind of alongside that, some people will never be comfortable with integrating their identity. Just speaking from personal experience, my grandma talked about how when she moved to the U.S. from Japan, she constantly missed Japan. She missed everything about Japan. She missed how clean it was, how polite people are, how industrious people are. There's a lot that she missed about Japan, and even now, I wouldn't say she's 100% integrated into American society. Now, does she speak English? She speaks English just fine, especially considering her background, her ethnic background, her cultural background, her national background. But oftentimes her ideas are counter to popular American ideas, popular ways of doing things in America. For example, she's quite strict and quite disciplined, and sometimes, at least in the area where we're from in the U.S., people aren't necessarily always very disciplined. They're not always very strict. They don't always follow her standard of doing things. So consider that when you move to a new country, be patient. Understand that you're in a different country, you're in a different culture, and there are things that you're going to have to accept about your new home, or else you're in for a bumpy ride. You're going to have a tough time if you try to resist the changes, because there are a lot of changes, regardless of what country you move from and to. Even in North America, there's a number of differences between the U.S. and Canada, Canada and Mexico, etc., that you're going to have to adjust to and be prepared for. So don't try to project, I guess, your home country's way of doing things on your new country's way of doing things. I think that can really cause friction, and you don't want friction in your new country. Expats are presumably trying to make a better life. They're trying to pursue a more fulfilling way of being and doing things, and definitely it takes willingness to adjust. Kind of the next point, life expectancy may be lower in your new country. So if you're moving to, let's say, Cambodia, I think the life expectancy for adult men is something like 58 to 60 years. And there's a number of reasons for this, but it's worth considering that if you are an older person, it's not necessarily going to be super friendly to you. In some of these countries, in my opinion, I use the phrase "life is cheap" in some of these countries, in that there's high birth rates, and people don't anticipate living a long time, so they don't necessarily understand the needs of older people. I noticed in Phnom Penh, for example, Cambodia, that there are a number of times where I saw an older individual, a senior citizen, trying to navigate through traffic, and they're not, as spry as a young person, and they're having to really try hard to avoid getting hit. And I'm sure that there have been cases where older people have been hit by vehicles and had other experiences where they may have been taken advantage of. They may have run into issues simply from, not being able to adjust as easily. I've known a number of older people. I was raised by my grandmother. I spent a lot of time around older people, and many of them have told me, when you get older, it's harder to adjust. It's harder to learn new languages. Your body does not recover as quickly, and your mind doesn't always work as quickly as it used to. You may be a bit more forgetful. These types of things aren't always taken into account by local people when you do move to a new country. They're not always, not all cultures have a respect for older people. Now, in my opinion, coming from Japan, there is a respect for older people. So I'm kind of used to, for better or for worse, having to defer to older people. And I try to do what I can to show them that respect, but understand that that's not the case in every country. So, kind of moving on from that, understanding that life expectancy may be not quite as high as what you're used to. I'll hit on one more point. Hospitals might not be as good. Depending on the country that you move to, you may not be able to get the medical care that you're used to, and particularly not in your area. So, if you move to a country and you're moving out to the provinces or a remote part of the country, you may be a helicopter away from a hospital, as opposed to just getting in an ambulance if something happens. You may have to get in a vehicle, go to the nearest airport, which could be like an hour away, then fly to the main city, and it can just really get convoluted. Whereas even in relatively small metro areas in the United States of less than 100,000 people, even like less than 50,000 people, there's a hospital. So keep in mind that if you're moving to a more of a developing country, that you may not see the medical and dental infrastructure that you're used to seeing in your home country, and you may be put in a situation where you'd pay any amount of money to heal, but it's just simply not there. The medical personnel are simply not there. The medical personnel that might be in your area may not have access to the tools they need. It can get really tricky when it comes to living a long life. So kind of moving on from that, though, onto my next point, banking will probably become a bit more complex. If you're getting like a pension in the States, if you're getting investments in the States, if you're getting, UK, wherever you're getting your money, you're going to have to figure out a way to set up a local bank account and set up transfers. If you have issues with those banks, some banks in Western countries don't like having clients that live in other countries. They're fine with you traveling, they're fine with you visiting other countries, but they don't want to service people that live in other countries. They feel like the risk is too high and they're not going to make a profit from dealing with you. So keep in mind that banking's probably going to become more complicated. You're probably not going to be able to just run down to the ATM to get a large sum of money if you need it in an emergency. It may dictate that you only get smaller amounts. I know in some countries they limit you to like the equivalent of 300 US per withdrawal, and certainly when it comes to big unexpected costs, 300 US might just be a drop in the bucket compared to what you need. So you may have to pay extra in fees. You may have to hit your max and then wait for the next day and then hit your max again. I mean, these are things to keep in mind, that when it comes to thinking about, living in another country and doing things in another country. Next, loneliness is a factor that breaks some people. So some people really never adjust to their new country. Some people, they leave their home country, they move to another country, and they deeply miss their friends and family. They miss being able to speak their home language, English. And in this case, my channel is in English. They miss being able to communicate with people very easily. They miss going to their favorite restaurants. They miss their home neighborhood. They miss their hometown. And they never really get over this. They never really adjust. They find that they feel like a stranger in their new country. They may have a hard time understanding the local culture as well as they thought they would. They might have really enjoyed the place on vacation, but when they find when they're not leaving, that they're staying there long term, that it takes on a different sort of character, that the things that they used to tolerate on vacation or laugh at become quite frustrating when they occur on a regular basis. So keep in mind that if you do have a network back home, whether you have children, spouse, parents, etc., you're probably not going to be able to see them as often, and you may miss them a lot. Now, in my case, I don't really have remaining family. My grandma's the only one, and when eventually she's gone, I won't have anybody in my home country. So there's nothing really, in my case, there's nothing for me to go back to. So that's a big reason for me to consider this lifestyle, is that I'm not going to be giving up family by going abroad. It's neither here nor there. For me, it's really where do I feel fulfilled and happy, not taking that into consideration, because it's just a non-issue for me. But if that's an issue for you, keep in mind that the expat lifestyle might not be for you. Finally, you may have a disconnect with kind of second to final. You may have feel a disconnect with non-expats and non-immigrants. I've noticed this, that as I get older, most of the people, not all, but most of the people that I really connect with are first and second generation immigrants. So that's not necessarily the case in Asia, but back home in the US, I just have a harder time relating to people that have been living in the States for many, many generations. There's just this sort of, I don't know, difference in way of doing things. It may be because I'm Asian, but I find that the more I travel and the more I think about culture and values, that it can be really hard to connect, that my attitudes, views, and mindset can be kind of antithetical to some of the views and the mindsets of people that have been back home for many generations. And I think that that's increased by my travels because I'm just looking at things through a different lens. And kind of to follow up on that point, I was reading a Reddit post where I think it was just like a guy, he mentioned that he had lived abroad for like 20 years and came back to the US, and people kept treating him strangely. And he realized, well, there's only one factor here is I've lived in another country for 20 years. I think he was in his early 40s, and people can sense that. They can sense that I'm not a local. I'm not from here, and I may have a slightly different accent. And that's really something to think about is, how will the expat lifestyle decision affect your situation back home? You may feel like, oh, I'll go abroad for 5, 10 years or something and go back. It may not line up that way. It's kind of hard to look beyond 5 years anyway, but it's worth considering that it could really highly impact your long-term plans in ways that you don't realize. Kind of my final point, you're going to be learning and committing to a new set of rules, laws, cultures, foods. It's going to be really different, and you have to be prepared. I've known some people that will move to a country without ever having visited there. And I'm not big on this idea. I know some people are sort of vicarious, and they're willing to take the chance, and if it doesn't work out, they'll move on. But understand that you could be in for some unexpected surprises, and that for some people that turns out to be really negative. Some people move to a new country and find themselves after a couple of years constantly complaining about it, constantly complaining about the locals, complaining about the food, the lifestyle, the weather. Do a lot of research before you commit to moving to a new country. Visit the new country. Perhaps visit the new country for like a month. See what it's about. Don't just go there to the resort and enjoy your time at the beach and say, oh, well, I could live at the beach and do this forever. Understand that living somewhere and visiting somewhere are very different and sometimes opposite. I remember that I lived in Colorado for a few years after visiting there for a while, and I'm not big on living in Colorado. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't, living in Colorado was not the same as visiting there. Colorado's an expensive place, and I found that to keep up with the cost of living, I did not get to enjoy the outdoors as much as I thought I would. I still did. I went on hikes and I got to do different outdoor sports and activities, but doing these activities once in a while as opposed to spending a week or two straight doing these activities are really different experiences. So consider that before you want to pursue this expat lifestyle, that it may not be for you, and you may feel better if you just live in your home country and just visit some of these places. Make it a point that, well, you know what, I don't know that I want to live in Thailand, but I think I could spend a month per year there and make time and make money to do that. I know that in Europe, from my understanding, they get 5 weeks of vacation per year. So you might say, well, once a year I'll go to one of these countries for 2.5 weeks, and then about 6 months later I'll go to a different one for 2.5 weeks. And that might be a preferable solution where you retain your friendships and relationships back home, you retain your job, your career trajectory, you retain your home, but you're still able to enjoy some of these places abroad, and you can mix it up that way. I mean, you could say, well, I want to try this one, and I want to try that one, and I want to try all these different ones. And I really enjoy Thailand, but it helps me appreciate Thailand even more now, having visited Cambodia, having visited the Philippines, having visited Malaysia. I think that trying these different sort of flavors out has really helped me enjoy my time here in Thailand. So I hope that this video has been informative. I hope this has kind of helped you understand why expat lifestyles are not for everyone, why it may be worth trying things out before you commit. And yeah, I'll see you next time.